So basically, this session is out of the out of the current work, and also I want to encourage the best practice to use this sequelize-cli to version control the database state change. Okay, whatever database change, either we use, because right now we use MySQL database. So how are we gonna version control the database change so that it can be reflect in our source code repository doing the source code management, as well as when we migrate the change into database dev environment or production environment, how we automate this, how do we minimize the risk, how do we minimize human errors, right? So that's the basically the motivation of creating this blog to document this practice. Okay, so first of all, we need to have some prerequisite. Is the you have to understand what is NPX. Maybe I will play this video so that you can understand about NPX. Can you hear my video score? Can you voice of the video?
No.
Okay, maybe I need to share the video, the system sound as well.
You need to play the video. It was not playing.
Oh yeah, I think nothing is playing.
No, I was also not sharing the system sound. Yeah, so now I share the system sound. You can hear the system sound.
This is Ryan H. Lewis, and today I want to talk about the cool new utility from the NPX.
Can you hear the voice of the YouTuber?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I hope this is okay. The voice
team called NPX. We're going to talk about what it is and then look at some examples of what you can do with it and why you would want to use it. So first we'll start with what is NPX. It's essentially a new CLI tool from the NPM team. It ships with NPM starting at version 5.2.0. So if you install NPM past that version, you'll see that it has also installed a binary called NPX. And basically you can think of it as a node package executor. Its primary goal is to run node packages in a variety of ways. Some of these ways are as follows. You can execute local binaries very easily by just using the npx command and then passing the name of the binary. This is different from normal execution because usually when you execute a local binary, you have to add the node modules /bin path to the command. And this can get a little tiresome adding this boilerplate every time. You can also run binaries that aren't actually installed yet. So let's say you've got something like Webpack that you want to run, but you haven't installed it yet. You can just execute the command npx webpack and it will go and download that binary and then execute it. It installs to a temporary location, so once the execution is complete, it will be gone. And finally, you can run command strings. So using the -c argument, you can execute different node commands. So the first use case for NPX that I want to look at is running your local dependencies as if they were global. If you've got a project where you install a package locally, such as serverless in this case, and you wanted to use it, you would have to add the full path when executing the command, like so. This isn't the end of the world, but it can get kind of tiresome to always add the node modules bin path to any command that you want to run locally. This especially causes problems when you're writing npm scripts because you have to keep referencing this node modules bin all over your file, and sometimes it can get difficult to find out what the command is actually doing. With npx now, you can have your local dependency installed and use the npx command instead of adding the whole path. Yes, you do have to add the npx command, but I feel like it's better than adding that whole path to the command. The next use case is for global binaries that you don't use a lot. Perfect examples are things like Yeoman or Webpack CLI or Create React App that you use maybe once a month that you don't depend on for your everyday work. NPX allows you to not keep these dependencies locally and instead just download and run them when you actually need them. In this case, I don't have Webpack CLI installed globally, but I want to run it locally. So I can use npx with the Webpack CLI and then pass that Webpack CLI commands like init and using the React add-on. npx will download that Webpack CLI binary and then it will execute it with the arguments that I gave it. The next use case for npx is being able to try packages before you actually download and run them. This is especially great for packages that have new versions. You can check out the new version before you decide whether to upgrade your project or not. Let's take this project, for instance, where I have Webpack installed globally, and it's currently at version 2.6.1. With Webpack 3.0, the team introduced some optimizations with bundling your assets so that the end result is smaller than previous versions. So I can try that out using npx and run Webpack at version 3.0 to see what the difference would look like on my project. And you can see the second call was with 3.0, and it saved me a couple of bytes. Another great example of this is when you're developing something actively and maybe you need to test out some local code. In my case, I was testing out a new fix for a bug in serverless and needed to try the code that was in the fix branch. With npx, I can execute the serverless project from the Git repository at a specific branch to see if it fixed my issue. Without npx, I'd have to do some npm link stuff and pull down the remote repository, so it helps out a lot when you're trying to do things like this. And the last feature is just something kind of...
I think that's enough. So we don't have to go through the GIST features because we are not using GIST for this as of now. So I hope this video can set the basic stage for you to understand the npx, because we going to heavily rely on npx for us to do the job for the sequelize command line, right? So this basically is a prerequisite before we go into the details of our sequelize CLI to version control database change, right? So before I start just going to the solution, I want to first highlight the problem statement, right? So basically the problem we're facing every day is that as a developer, we are an application developer, right? And whenever there's we want to do some database change, we are very tempted to change it directly in the database itself, right? For example, we want to add a index to the existing table, or we want to create a new table schema. We basically go to our database IDE, and then not IDE per se, but it's a GUI for the database, and then create a table here, something like that, and then configure the schema or whatever it is. Then you save this change, right? So basically, this one this is my local, so I can just delete it. So it's okay. Basically, this is not a very good way to sort of like to do the development. You can say you can do this like exploration kind of matter. For example, you just want to try a feature in database, so you create a table and you create, for example, a new feature. Let's say I create a new stop procedure, something like that. I try it on my local database. I mean, you can do that as an experimentation stage. But if let's say you already move on from the experimentation stage to an actual implementation stage, I would say it's not really good to still doing this as a offline approach like this, manually create a table or manually insert this stop procedure and so on and so forth, right? Because if let's say you only implement it in the your local environment, and you want to bring this solution or deploy this solution from local environment to the dev environment, chances are, after a few days, right, and you already forgot, right, what you have implemented in the local instance, right? And you don't have like a proper documentation, you don't have a proper journal in terms of or logs in terms of what you have done in your local instance, right? How do you manage to memorize all this in your own brain and then bring it to the dev environment? And usually it's very risky and prone to errors to manually track all the changes in your local instance and bring to different environments. So that's why a version control on the database change are very important. Can also help us to avoid those low-level mistakes. Or I found that last time when we deploy our point system to the production environment, I just find when after we deploy the point system, I found there's basically a stop procedure missing from the production environment, and then due to that, the production environment sanity check gives error, right? So this is because we don't have the basically documentation or version control on the database change when we deploy to the production. So it's very prone to error and also very time consuming as well to check all the changes. We have to basically open IDE and see, okay, this is my local dev environment, environment variable. Maybe we have to look at each table. Okay, what are the index I have created for this table, and compare it with the production environment, and what is the change and all that, so on and so forth. So this is very time consuming to do this job, and it's a nightmare for developers' productivity as well, right? Can I get a show of hands if you have facing the same problems as such in your development?
Yes, we face this in the current week itself.
Yeah. So that's why the solution we propose to solve this problem is using the sequelize-cli command, right? And the migration files to document the database state changes, as well as to easily keep track of the change and then easily to automate the migration, right? So basically we use this called sequelize-cli command line. Unfortunately, sequelize-cli don't have comprehensive documentation in its official website. I would say the documentation is still very minimal. Has some examples, but the different use cases of, it's not very comprehensive. Basically, it's just give you basically a framework, a skeleton of code that you can fill in the details of how you're gonna use it. Basically, you fill in the SQL command line, right? And then you use this to document the SQL database change. Okay, so the way to use it is that you can install this sequelize-cli in your dev dependencies, right? If let's say I take an example of the price system. So as you can see, in the price system, I already included the sequelize-cli in my dev dependencies, right? The version is 6.2.0. So I have the latest sequelize-cli. Now it's available my local node. This repository's node modules, so I can directly use it using my npx sequelize, right? And then there are a few command under the sequelize command line. So you can see I execute npx sequelize. Basically, npx sequelize will just read your node modules using the sequelize, the local sequelize command line version to execute the command line. Okay, so I don't have to specify the full path to the sequelize under the node modules. I also don't have to, use the global sequelize command line. It's like using npx sequelize, just like execute sequelize in a global format or global way, just like a global command line. So basically, these are the command under the sequelize. And you can see there's a db sequelize init is initialize the sequelize project. You will initialize this entire, basically will initialize a few things like including the config file, config folder, and also the seed folders, right? And models, I guess, migration folder as well. So these are the essential folders for sequelize to be installed in your project. So this sequelize init will create this folder as well as the files in under the path. And then another few command line that we will later use is db migrate and also db seed and db create. Okay, so these are the and yeah, DB model generate we will not show, but DB model generate I will just highlight is that if you want to have a database, right? Actually, if you want to create a database model file, you can also use sequelize model generate. It will create its model and its migration file. So later I will show you how do we have also a DB create. So DB create, I believe, will create the migration file. So later I will demonstrate this, how to create a migration file, but sequelize model generate will not only create a model, not only create a migration file, but also create a model file under the models path. Okay, something like that. So, so since we have already have this sequelize in place, let's create like a example migration skeleton file first. So we can use this npm sequelize migration create. So basically, migration create, migration create this generate. This is generate. I think this one is not full, but this one is migration create. So we'll create a migration file called test.npx. Okay, so test.npx will create this one. So this one is created by the sequelize command line. Basically, you create a skeleton migration file. So you can see inside these files, it has a up function, it has the down function. So up is for you to commit the change into the database, and down is like a roll back the change, right? You want to undo, then you feel the table you create has some issues, then or the type you type in is wrong, then you will need to undo the change. You can do the undo using this down is instruct the sequelize command line how to undo the change or how to roll back the change. Okay, so this one you can see the files are created with the timestamp as a prefix. So basically, this is for sequelize easier to manage the files in the chronological sequence, so that the earlier file will be sorted earlier, and the later created file will be put under the last files. So this is basically sorting the files in a chronological format. Yeah, and then yeah, so you can fill in what are the operations you want to do under the up and the down, right? So for example, let's say I want to create a table here. You can create a table using this SQL interface dot create table, and you need to specify the table name and then the fields under the table, right? So let's say I want to so let's say I want to create some tables under this folder. I will just put something like this one. So this one will help me to create a table called prices, right? And then all the fields under the prices will be, you will fill in under this object, optional object, right? I don't know why this type has a duplicate, say something like a duplicate. So I need to remove this. It's okay. So then you also need to provide a rollback mechanism. So let's say the database is down or something, you have to roll it back. So drop the table prices. Okay. So this is basically for the DB table creation, but there's a caveat. Since the model in sequelize has a name, but the name of the model may not be the same as the table name in the database. So normally the models is using the singular form. Singular means there's no S behind the model name, okay? So let's say filter email, there's no S behind filter email. So the files under the models folder is a singular form, okay? But in the database, if we take a look at the database, the data table name is always a plural form, right? So filter email S, we add a S behind it. So this is basically the convention, naming convention in sequelize. So sequelize will understand this, right? Your file have the singular form to represent the model, but in your database, you have the plural form, right? So basically, sequelize understand this naming convention. So when you create a table, you always provide the table names because your migration file will directly touch the database and create this table called prices, right? So you need to, in your migration file, you need to use the plural form if let's say you want to create a table. But in your code, in your model file, you always use a singular form, right? So this is the naming convention for you to understand. So after this done, then you can execute the sequelize command line to create a table in the database. So let's say I'm going to create a table. I'm not going to call it prices because in my local host I already have a price. I already have a table called prices. I can change it to something else. Let's say I change it to products. Okay, how about that? So I create this called products. Then in sequelize command line, I have another command. Called db migration. So this db migration basically is running the pending migrations, as you can see. So db migration will actually look at your migrations folder and run all those migration files which are not yet in the database, or which have not been migrated into the database, right? So, and you have additional optional flag, which is URL. So the URL you can change according to different database host URL that you're gonna migrate to, right? So in this case, I'm specifying the host, the local host. I'm going to migrate migrate the database to the local host MySQL database. Okay, so actually the way sequelize keep track of the migration is using this sequelize meta table. So you can see in the sequelize meta table, I have all the the changes I have made to the database. These files, these are the files name. You can see these are the files name I have migrated into my local host. So you can see I think these two I don't need to keep track because I just do a test on these two. So you can see all the files I already have here in my local host, except the last file, the last migration file, right? So last migration I just created called test npx. It's not here, but all the files before the test npx has been already migrated into the local host. So the way that sequelize is keeping track of the change is that you scan the files under your migrations folder and check against the sequelize meta table, see whether which file has been migrated, which file is not being migrated, and migrate those file hasn't been migrated, right? In this case, it's only one file called test npx. Okay, so let's do this here. Let's just try this. Let's run this command line. Right, so nps sequelize db migrate. After this is executed, you can see it has one migration, so which is test npx, migrated, right? Show your status. Then you come here, you do a refresh. You can see one more row is inserted called this test npx. And you can see here, there's a new table called products has been inserted, right? So as simple as that. Yeah, so you can ask any question you want to ask. Yeah, you can feel free to interrupt me.
Okay. I have this scenario before, right, in the migrations where it points, the other one is pointing to the rewards DB dev, and then the other one is pointing to the rewards admin portal.
Mm.
So if I run the sequelize migration, this one, it's like they are only going to check one database. So is it possible to, like, how are we going to handle this one to point that this, okay, this migration one should point to the reverse DB dev, and then this one.
Yeah, I think if you run into this situation, I would say since we are doing this right in microservice architecture, let's say if this table is pertaining to system product, the point system, you need to let the point system to keep the migration file, and if this is pertaining to price system, then you have to let the price system to run this migration, keep this migration file, right? And your rough admin, you only should keep those migration file pertaining to the admin database.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, what I did before is I have to move this rewards DB dev migration and then let the admin run, and then I add
Yes.
this.
Otherwise, you keep track of 3 database changed, which is really a not very good way to for you to do that. Yeah.
Yes.
I suggest you can distribute this migration file to each microservices.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I understand. Okay. That's it.
So
okay, I have one question.
yeah.
So we are creating the file file names, the add, change, the create in front of the date and after the date, right? This one we are for the identification for the create table, add column, like, right? In the folder, the migration folder. Currently the pattern is we are creating the create price, create transaction, but some of the file name is add event, that one. This one is just identification for the prefix, right?
Identification proof. What's your? I don't understand your question.
This one is just file name that you like decide.
You can decide the file names as after the prefix. You can put more meaningful. You have to put meaningful file names to naming this migration file, but the prefix, the timestamp, is generated by automatically by the sequelize command line.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So you have to, so basically you need to have a meaningful, you have to name this file a meaningfully using the sequelize. So the sequelize will handle the timestamp generation. You don't have to generate the timestamp yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, when you run the sequelize create, then it will create this file and then it will start with the timestamp.
Yeah. So the timestamp is for sequelize to run this in a chronological order, so that it run this first as create a price and then creates transaction and one by one. Otherwise, there's no, if no timestamp, if it's a random order, then some of those operation cannot be run, because these operations are based on previous operations. Right, like a GitHub history. So the later commit always depends on the previous commit. Right, this timestamp must be a chronological order. Right, you can think of like this is like a commit history. All these are commit to the database in a time order, ascending order, so that all these are running, must be run this migration file in this chronological order in order for the database to change correctly.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Okay. Is that clear?
Yeah. I agree.
So next is another thing is whether we can undo this change. Last time I think I did some undo before. Let me try undo. Yeah, so we can also undo this. undo is that you put db migrate and the colon undo. It will undo the last migration file that you have done, right? So last migration file is this test npx. So it will revert the test npx, right? So if you go back to the database, you can see the products table has been deleted, rollback, and the change has been rollback. Right, so this is helping us kind of like easily to roll back if, let's say, you find some issues with your migration file. So this is db create. We can also add a deep. Let's say you want to let's say business requirement has changed and we want to adjust the existing table or adjust the existing schema. You can also do this via the sequelize migration file. So a way to do it is just add a, you know, this is an example of adding a new table field. So you use query interface dot add colon, right? You specify the table name, you specify the colon name, and you specify optional fields, which is the type of the colon and whether it's allowed now or not, right? Then you can also put more information into this optional object. To make this, if you have more specified requirement of this column, then you put more information here. Then there's also a rollback operation that is remove the column, right? So it's always you need to have a change rollback mechanism in case there's an issue with your migration file, right? This always in pair. And another is change the existing DB table field type. So for example, I want to change the field type description, right? Previously, maybe it's in another type. Now I'm changing it to the text type, right? This is the way how we do it. So change the colon using change colon, right? And we'll change this colon from the string to text, and then the rollback mechanism, change colon. So it will change the description back to string. Like this, right? So this one, as you can see, this one doesn't use async await, still using the old promise then. But if you use the async await, right? So you don't need to use a return. You basically just put await there. So then it will do the same. Yeah, it will do the job. So you just use, if you use async await pattern, basically like this. Yeah, it's very simple. I would say, yeah. So this one is adding a table index. So yeah, all these are basic DB operations. What I want to say is that basically all the as a developer, we should not touch the database. Only the DBA should touch the database directly. As a developer, we should not touch that. All our change to the database should be all through our source code, like this. So meaning that if you want to change the database schema, you want to add a new index, you want to add a stop procedure, all has to be done through the migration file, right? So this is a way that you add a database index, right? You specify, you use add index, and you specify the table, you specify the colons to add index, and the index type, B-tree, and all that, and then the rollback remove the index, okay? So yeah, so these are all basic syntax. But if let's say we want to add a stop procedure, then this is the way how you add a stop procedure, right? So this one is adding a stop procedure, but before adding the stop procedure, you need to make sure that this stop procedure does not exist in the database. Otherwise, you will have an error. So you always drop the procedure if exists this target stop procedure. Okay, so this will run first. So you can see the syntax is query, still using query interface, sequelize.query. So this one will run the query inside this bracket. And then after that, you run the creation of the stop procedure. You put your stop procedure, basically MySQL command line, inside this query interface, as simple as that. Then the rollback mechanism is also the same. Just drop the procedure if the procedure exist. Okay, any questions? Okay, no more question. Let's see another example of the DB schedule event. So the DB scheduler event is it's more tricky. So we found that actually Qingmei has done some research into it. So we found that actually when we run the event is that when we run from the Node.js migration file, the session time zone will use the default time zone. So it's not like you run in the ID, GUI or browser. Because the browser or the GUI itself has a local time zone, right? It has your OS time zone. So when you run that, it always use your local time zone, your session time zone actually. So the session time zone is in Singapore is the 8 hours, and in India is 5.5 hours. So you will keep track of your local time zone. But when you run from the migration file, the session time zone is lost, or I have to say that it doesn't have your local OS time zone. It will use the default time zone, which is the UTC time zone, right? So if you want to run the schedule event pertaining to Singapore time zone, we have to set the session time zone first before we run the stop procedure migration. So that's why we have this first line here. So we set, first of all, we set the session time zone. It's an 8-hour time, Singapore time zone. And then we drop the event, and then we create a new event, right? As simple as that, right? And eventually the rollback is also drop the event if there's an event exists in the database. So yeah. So basically, to summarize that, sequelize provides a very elegant way to keep track of all the database state change in one table called sequelize meta table, and you can keep track of all the change there. And once it's run, it will check against this table, see what are the tables, what are the files has been migrated, what are the files hasn't been migrated yet, then run those migration files so that your database change is consistent with your local environment. Okay, so eventually when you done your migration file, then if you want to run all the migration, you use this command line. So dbx sequelize db migrate. I have run this before just now. So you need to specify your target migration database. So this one is a local. Then if we want to migrate to the dev environment, then we need to change this MySQL URL to the dev URL. Or if we migrate this to production, then we change to production URL. Right. Yeah, that's from the DB sequelize migration. There's also another topic on how to generate the seed data. I will not go into the details. So basically, you can go to the link and check yourself. If let's say you want to initialize your table with some seed data, you can use this sequelize seed. There's a sequelize seed command. You can generate the seed data using your data file that you prepared. You can be a JSON file that you put in your source code. For example, I have a seed file here. When I create the price system, I have a seed file price.js. Under the price.js, I have all the seed file in the like a JSON array. And I have redemption seed files. I have wheel price, wheel option seed file as well. So this seed data I created in case that I need to like initialize a database with all these seed files. I will just run this. I will just run a command line called npm seed migrate or npm db seed all. So this will run all the seed files, and then and create this, once the table is created, we'll insert all these seed data into the database. Yeah. Right?
Okay.
Any questions? I hope this is clear to all of you.
Yes, yes, it is clear. No questions from my side.
All right. So since yeah, let's just using this sequelize migration command line, yeah, for all the DB change in the future from now on. And I hope, yeah, this can help us to easily to manage the database and version control the database change, right? And you know, solve our pinpoint in doing the database deployment.
Yes, I mean, it will be easier so that we'll not miss anything when we are even deploying things to the different environments.
Yes, that's right. Okay, if no more questions, I will stop sharing.